Hey there everybody, it's Wayne D. Welcome to the website WayneD.com. If you're on YouTube, click the bell and subscribe and maybe come on over to the website. We're going to look at one of the threesome of great college players that has just come out. This is Collin Morikawa. Came out the same time as Victor Hovland and Matthew Wolff. Morikawa put in some great finishes last year. Had a fourth and a second, and then he won. And got off to a pretty good start this year. And an interesting swing. Controls the ball well. He averages just about 300 yards off the tee. Great iron player. His stats approaching the green are excellent. Putting seems to be a little bit of a weakness, but can't be that weak when you win and have those finishes on tour. So let's take a look at this swing. So face-on views are hard to get, and here we've got one that started off about that far away. So I'm going to bring it in, and the reason I want to look at this, can't really draw lines on this one because it's handheld and camera's off angle, but the reason I wanted to look at this is I wanted you to focus in on Collin's grip, because the way he is going to use his left wrist during the swing is going to be a huge part of what's interesting about it. So you can see here, and again, this camera angle is not on, it's coming from this direction a little bit here. But when you watch the face and you watch Morikawa's grip, you know that when you look at a left wrist that's like this and a face that matches, then you know that the grip is not strong. In fact, if you look at it from here face on, it looks as though it's quite flat, and anytime he leans that club forward, it's going to look like it's more in flexion. So if you look at, for example, Dustin Johnson, if you look at my grip, you're going to see a lot of left wrist extension at address. So in other words, you're going to see the wrist pushed in, and what I would call vertical wrist bones. So if you look at the radius and the ulna bone of the wrist, they would be right on top of each other. And in a grip where it's weaker like this, you'd see the top of the wrist more over here. So that's going to allow him, when he turns it away, if he uses more of a right forearm type takeaway, if he adds any right wrist extension, he's going to flatten that left wrist even a little bit more. And you know that face, because that looks pretty neutral there, and with that left wrist looking bowed and the face neutral, you know the grip is weak. So if we look at it, we can draw some lines on the down the line. Let's take a look at the face on. So you see an interesting right arm movement. It's pretty high at P3, and you've got it also flared like that. So we've seen a lot of swings recently where the right arm at P3 is way more in front, where the elbow is way over here where Collin's hands are, which means the left arm would be way less across the chest here. So as he flares that right arm out, it's going to take him some movement to bring it back in front. So you see the elbow poking out here, and we'll see how he uses that right arm adduction to get it back in front of him. But let's take a look from this angle. We can still see, even though it's not perfect, we can still see that there's plenty of lateral movement, even though when you look at it from over here it's going to accentuate it a little bit. It's still there. So the point that I want to make here is that you see swings where the right leg will be much more stable starting down with that little squat move. Morikawa does not do that. He is a right leg driver, so he's got the hips sliding as they open. And then take a look at that left wrist after impact. So that's on the approach, so you can see how bent down that is. He's added tons of flexion and maintained it past the ball. So we'd call this a drive hold pattern here, where he's driving the handle past the ball with the left wrist flat in flexion and maintains that way past, a la Spieth, DJ Koepka. You see that a lot now. The backswing, however, is way different. So the right arm, you can see it. So look at that. Lots of forearm angle here. Now, a lesser player is going to have trouble with that arm back up there behind him and bent like that. And certainly when we watch him come forward, we're going to see the right arm remain bent, but we're also going to see it move back in front of him. So we've got that. Check out the left wrist at the top. But like I said, has not been done by adding a whole bunch of flexion to the wrist, because he already pretty much was flat at address. And then in the takeaway, I'd say that the wrist is already pretty much there. So as you get up to the top, what he has to do now is he has to take this structure here up there, and he has to move this whole thing back in front of him for some clearance. So let's draw the hip box and see what's going on with the legs. Another thing you'll notice, and this is something that he's 5'9" and 160 according to the tour stats, but as is the case these days, extremely strong. I think the weight room work that the colleges are doing now is really bringing these guys out as superior athletes with a lot of strength, and since they have no body fat, plenty of mobility. So we'll see the takeaway slightly lower than plane. His hands sit quite low at address, and he keeps it down there. So in that case, we would expect the club to be a little vertical at P3, which it is. And if you look at the face, again, it's almost all the way toe up, even though that left wrist looks extremely flat and bowed there. He's going to get up to the top, just slightly crossed. Another thing you might expect when the right arm flares and he has that much right shoulder movement behind him. So you see added a little bit of depth in the right hip, very little pelvic rotation in the backswing. When you see the knees only move barely past the box like this. Now, interesting start down here. When he starts down with that extra turn, the right hip looks like it stays up a little bit. So you might think if you were just looking at this from behind that he's spinning there, but we know for a fact that that's not the case, because that right leg is driving all the time. So if we draw that down from the top, we're going to watch the hand path fall a little bit. It's going to start a little out to get that club moving sideways. But right now, watch that right arm. He's adducting, meaning he's driving it down and forward. And with the left wrist flat like that, he's got that right wrist already extended, supinating the right forearm. And with that arm up there in that position as he comes down, he could straighten it out, but he chooses to drive it in front of him and keep that left wrist. Look at that left wrist angle there. He chooses to bring that thing in. Look how high that is. So that club is now going to descend and work around to the left. You would expect him to be hitting maybe a little more of a fade, but not much of one. Just a slight pullback of the head, another thing that's very common. If that's the way you're going to create space and keep the hips in the box, that's cool. And if we look at that right leg action, he's got a little bit of that Justin Thomas baseball spin and drive. So he's going to get up on that right heel a little bit quick, and then as he hits the ball, watch the right leg push in and left, which is a big deal. But you can see the stability through impact on this face-on view. Great extension. So always nice to have that good young 22-year-old body. All right.